Welcome everyone. Today our topic is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is one of the most important parts of our government, but is also one of the least understood parts of our government. So our main focus today is to see a case, how it goes from start to finish all the way to the Supreme Court. Some background knowledge before we begin. We all know that the Supreme Court is the highest court in the United States. All Supreme Court decisions set a precedent that must be followed by all of the lower courts. Basically, whatever the Supreme Court says, everyone else must follow then. There are two main types of court cases in the United States. Most people are familiar with criminal cases from TV and such. Criminal cases is basically when the government is charging a person with a crime. Jail is often a possibility if you are found guilty in a criminal case. Good example of a criminal case is someone who is arrested for breaking and entering. They go into someone's house, they are caught inside, and arrested and charged with the crime. The other main type of case is actually more common, but less kind of well known, and it's called a civil case. A civil case is just when two sides, could be people, could be groups, have a argument or disagreement. And what they want to have happen is the court to settle their argument for them. There hasn't been a crime that's been committed, but these two sides can't agree on something. Good example would be I hire a carpenter to do some work at my house. He finishes and I don't pay him. He will sue me in court, and that will be a civil case. He wants to try and get the money back that I owe him. Criminal cases, civil cases. In 2013, there were over 600,000 court cases filed in the federal court system, and literally millions of court cases filed in the 50 state court systems. We have a very litigious society. Lots of people going to court, lots of the time. So think of this huge number of cases, millions and millions and millions of cases. Out of all those, an incredibly small percentage, only about 150 actually make it to the Supreme Court every year. So they basically hear like 0.0000001% of the cases. Our goal is to look at this very small percentage and see how a case actually goes all the way to the Supreme Court. To do this, we're going to use a case study because we need a real case to kind of go through the process. So one of the cases that's pretty famous is something that happened here in St. Louis. It actually happened in the Hazelwood School District. My wife graduated from Hazelwood School District. Miss Hinton, her son goes there, so very close to home. The Hazelwood School District had a newspaper. Most high schools do. And students enrolled in the journalism class were responsible for writing and editing the school's paper. Two of the articles that they wrote had to do with divorce and teenage pregnancy. The school principal, he always read the paper before it went out, and he said that these articles were inappropriate. And he basically yanked them from the paper, said you can't put that in the school newspaper. The kids felt that this was unfair. They felt that their First Amendment rights to freedom of speech and freedom of the press had been violated. So this is kind of the basic case. The kids thought that the principal shouldn't have taken their stories out. He violated their First Amendment rights. The principal said, no, I'm the principal, I can do that. And there we have our disagreement. Step one, the students and their parents, they hired a lawyer. That's usually the first step. You got to get a lawyer to help you out. And they sued the school, took them to court saying that their First Amendment rights had been violated. Especially, they said, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Step two, the case went to the first level of courts, which is the U.S. District Courts. And the one for St. Louis is the Eastern Court of Missouri. Basically, they argued, and the school argued, and when the trial was over, the courts were in favor of the school. They said the school does have the right to censor the school paper, and they said that the First Amendment rights of the students were not violated. So the school wins, the students lose. But it's not over. Step three, the students can appeal. They can take their case to the next level of courts. And that's just what happened. The students appealed the court's ruling, and it went up the line to the District Court of Appeals. And you can see here that Missouri is actually in the 8th District Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals this time reversed the lower courts, and they ruled in favor of the students. They said that the school had violated their First Amendment rights. They should not have taken those articles out, and the school was wrong to do that. Win for the students. Yay, they said. But before you get too excited, the school district now is going to ask the highest level of courts, the Supreme Court, to review their case. And remember, this is very rare. They hardly look at any cases. But the ones that they do choose are the ones that are the most difficult or the most controversial. And this was a really hard case, very controversial, so the Supreme Court decided to take a look at this Hazelwood School District Supreme Court case. So first thing that has to happen, once a court decides to hear a case, the court gives it a name. Hazelwood School District versus Kohlmeyer. Kohlmeyer was the last name of one of the students. It is also given a number, and this is kind of for just keeping track of everything purposes. The last thing that happens is that the court case is put on a calendar, which is called a docket. And once the court case has a name and a number, and it's on the docket, then it's officially ready to go. Now we're actually in the court, and they don't allow cameras in the court, so we have an artist's drawing here. And what happens is both sides are given an opportunity to come to the Supreme Court, and each gets to argue their side in front of the 9 Supreme Court justices. The justices sit up there and listen. There is a strict time limit for each side, and you can actually see they actually have a timer, and they have red and yellow and green lights to kind of let you know when you have to stop talking. And during the trial, the justices ask questions. Each side gives basically their opinion. Here's why I think my side is right. Here's why I think my side is right. When the time is up, justices say thank you, and everybody goes home. And there's nothing to do now but wait. The Supreme Court will not issue its decision for a couple of months. They have time to think it over and to really prepare what they want to say. When the Supreme Court is ready to make its decision, it's usually a big deal. A lot of people gather out front, and there are 2 opinions. There is the majority opinion, which most justices think, and there is the dissenting opinion, which the fewer justices think. This is a good time. You might want to stop it, and you might want to pause it, because you're going to have to copy down the majority decision. In our Hazelwood v. Kohlmeyer case, the majority decision was that the school did have the right to censor the student newspaper because it was part of an educational school activity. And it was never intended as like a real public newspaper. So bad for the students here. The court was on the side of the school. The principal does have the right to control what goes into the student newspaper. This decision by the Supreme Court is final. There's nowhere else to go. The students lost, and the principal of the schools won this case. What is also unique is that the decision sets a precedent that all other courts must follow in the future. Basically, now that they have made their decision, all of the lower courts in the future have to follow the decision of the Supreme Court. And that's how it works. A case that gets to the Supreme Court is heard. Both sides have a chance to give their viewpoints. The court makes its decision, and it is now kind of set in stone. This is how it will be in the future. One last question I want you guys to answer. Do you agree with the Supreme Court's decision in the Hazelwood v. Kohlmeyer case? Basically, do you think they made the right decision to censor the newspaper? Do you think the school should be able to control what goes in the student newspaper? Or do you think the students should get to put whatever they want because it's their newspaper and they have freedom of speech and freedom of the press? Please make sure to explain your thinking. Thank you, and see you guys next time.